This is episode 33, Speaking from Water. I'm with an absolute legend. This guy is the the top intellectual big wave surfer in the world. He lives the life of James Bond. Big wave surfing is just like a side thing he does. His real life just blows my mind. This is a part two. Dougal Paterson is on the line. Dougal, welcome to Speaking from Water.
Hi.
Hi, how are you doing?
I'm fine. I'm just bandaging up his nose.
One of my wounds. I just got the ultimate intro from Sean.
Oh, yeah?
And then you show up to bandage the...
So let's start there. What happened?
That's sun damage, eh?
Yeah,
let's see.
part of the deal.
Yeah, part of the deal.
So this, guys out there listening, this is a part two. Dougal was so great to grace us with his presence about a year and a half ago, and before that, I knew him mainly from the surfing world and what he's done in South Africa. He lives down in Cape Town. He is the premier local at Dungeons and charges hard. But after the podcast and then following him since, I've just been like blown away by his lifestyle and how he lives and the things he's done really since. So that's what we're going to get into today, and we're going to touch, of course, on the big wave surfing, but there's a few matters of fact that I'd like to discuss here. But again, Dougal, thank you for joining us, and how are you doing today?
Hey, Sean, I'm feeling a lot better after that introduction. Tell you, I didn't realize I was as premier as I am. I like it. Maybe some other guys should watch this. I'll appreciate it. So I get more waves in the lineup.
Oh, well, share it afterwards, and we'll see what happens. Yeah. But yeah, man, you've been killing it this past year. First, let's start in the water. What's been going on? I saw a lot of action from you over the summertime. It was your winter. Those months of June, July, and August look like you got a lot of good ones. You and Alan Van Geysen, he was shooting you. What was the haps?
What's some stories? Yeah, man. So yeah, I mean, for your viewers who don't know, I mean, the premier wave down here is a wave called Dungeons, which is, it's Africa's fiercest wave. Arguably it's one of the fiercest in the world, really. Certainly the most unpredictable. Very dangerous, deep water, close to a seal island, lots of sharks, very rogue. Even those who've been surfing it for a long time struggle really to read it well. It truly is the school of hard knocks, and the people who surf it a lot, or you can never surf it a lot. You can only surf it a few times a year, really, paddle surf it anyway. But find that when you go to other places that you can surf those other places really well, because you really have learned in the hardest place to ride big waves. So yeah, I mean, it hasn't been an incredible year for us there. There have been some very big, scary days. We had, the biggest wave is the biggest and most dangerous waves are still being ridden by the oldest guy in the lineup, which is Grant Twiggy Baker, who anybody who knows anything about big wave surfing would know. He's a multiple times world champion. So at age 51, he really is still leading the charge, which is quite phenomenal. It's quite inspiring for a 48-year-old to see that the best guy is still 3 years older than you. But then we've got a few sort of up and coming guys who are amazing, and they've had some good waves too. One of them is over in Hawaii at the moment. He's an invitee to the Jaws event. For anyone who doesn't know what that is, it's the world's premier big wave event. But they were expecting a amazing El Nino season, which just hasn't really happened yet. So everybody's all dressed up with nowhere to go. And my friend Matt has been sitting there with his family for 6 weeks, and he's got to turn around and come home tomorrow without the event having run. So yeah, it's been a strange season for us, but maybe it's the story of our lives. It's hurry up and wait. Lots of sitting around, lots of preparation, and never knowing when it's going to happen. How's that for an intro?
Yeah, that was great. So I want you to take us to that spot because it is so raw and you are so eloquent with your words. Give us the lowdown aesthetic of the situation, visually and physically, when it is at its best, and
Yeah.
what is that feeling like?
Okay. So, I mean, in the truest way, it really does feel like you are in a grand amphitheater of nature. You're out there. It's only Dungeons itself is only accessible by boat or jet ski, and so once you're out there, you've got this towering sentinel which stands above you. It's a few hundred meters, and then it forms like an amphitheater behind you. These giant mountains that stretch out, and then you've got the Seal Island, which is just in between. When there's a break in the waves, you can hear the barking of the seals, and when the wind's just right, to get this terrible rotting smell that comes off the island. So the whole thing, I think that's why they ended up calling it Dungeons. It's got this ominous feeling of death and isolation, I suppose. But then at the same time, there's, you've got this beautiful mystical aura, that happens because the sun only gets over the mountain fairly late in the morning, and so it casts a long shadow over the lineup, and you end up, in these scenes of where the people that you're with or the boats you're looking back toward are silhouettes. So it has a very otherworldly feel about it, I think, which adds to the mystique of the place. And often when it's photographed or a video shot of it, that's how it comes across. So it's got a very different feel to many other places that are photographed, because the water looks gray or dark gray or green, or just everything about it is ominous, ominous and scary. If I had it my way, I would change the name, just because it just adds to the terror of the place. And there really is a sense of terror about it. And as I age more and more, I've found that I clearly have to cognizantly hold it in front of my mind, the fact that there will be a day when the terror is too much. When that feeling is no longer helpful, but where the raw terror becomes a serious where it starts to damage you mentally, really, and when you start to override that kind of mental terror too much, I think it damages you. So I'm having to look at my time out there, and I'm trying to think, well, maybe I've got another 5 or 6 years out there, and then try and plan accordingly, and say, how am I going to use my time well? Very ominous place.
So here's the thing. What people, and what I didn't really know too much when we first spoke, was how premier of a world photographer you are, and you are also this amazing surfer. And before we get into the photography life, I see that as like a profession, and I see your big wave surfing as like a passion that is just you're just super into, but I don't see the two meeting. And I would like to know, why is it you don't shoot with out there?
Okay, gotcha. Yeah, once again, if we can send this link to my clients, and they can know just how lucky they are to work with me, world premier photographer, let's do that.
Well, we're gonna get into that because dude, your work's sick, and but I you could be one of the greatest surf photographers in the world. Like,
oh, I see where you're going with that. Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, I have friends who have had to make that fearsome choice, really, to decide whether they want to pursue a life of recording these things, recording these moments, or actually, riding those waves. I have one friend who's straddled it fairly well. We shot a feature-length documentary in 2018, or he shot it mainly. I partnered him with it. That documented the men who most often ride dungeons. And Rick, his name is Rick Wall. And in the story, he actually, on some of the days, he would set someone up filming, and he would go in and he would ride these waves himself. But it's you normally have to make the choice between those two, and it is a dilemma for me sometimes, because I can see, you can never turn the mind of a photographer off. So you're always looking at photographs, always taking photographs, always framing, always looking at the light, always trying to decide how it would be done better. But in the end, it's a choice. Do I want to ride these waves, or do I want to photograph these waves? And I do enough photographing of yeah, my work as a photographer, I'll describe in many ways as it's smoke and mirrors. In a sense, you have to create the best version of real life. So there's big productions, big teams that I work with, lots of locations, incredible logistics, strategic people, big client demands, briefs that take a long time to clear, and so often, by the time you get to what you're actually photographing, it's pretty truncated or cut off from real life. You're trying to curate real life. But so I wouldn't want to do that with my surfing and photography. It's a pure thing for me, and I describe it as my photography is my career, but then riding big waves is it's a deep calling. And it's a connection, and it's a privilege that connects me to a world and a time that is passing away, a time where where there were still mountain peaks that hadn't been climbed for the first time, where there was still, you hadn't gone into space, or where there were still rivers that hadn't been explored. And it connects me to, land masses that hadn't been discovered yet. Because when you're riding a big wave, there's only one of those. Each one is unique. Each one is its own thing, and it's never the same. So I used to think, when I was a kid, I had this profound sense of disappointment that there were no more dragons left to slay. And when I ride big waves, I find that there are still dragons to slay. So I call myself a photographer on one side, but in
You broke up there. Yeah, you broke up there for 1 second.
Oh,
but
see, hang on, wait. I think you've one of us is muted. Can you still hear me?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Hang on, I can't hear you.
Check.
Nothing.
Check. I can hear you perfectly. Check.
Okay, we're good?
I'm good. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Perfect. Okay, let's pick up there.
Yeah.
You have the nickname The Dragon Slayer.
Well,
because
it's an acronym that I use to describe the world of big wave surfing and my approach to it. It's not a nickname that I was given by someone else, but it's an acronym, or it's a way of understanding, or describing what I'm doing.
I see. So you view the wave as the dragon, and you yourself, before you go out, you view yourself as the guy who's going to slay it. Now, where the dragon is a deep mythical beast in the tales of long ago. The dragon has always been something that the person must slay to get the girl, to get the money. And it can be all the things that trouble that person. It doesn't have to be a real dragon, obviously. Do you surfing these big waves, does that give you the gold and the thing that you needed most in life, like when you slay that wave?
Yeah. It does, hey? It does, really. Dragon slayers don't live forever. Dragon slayers get old and their arms don't work anymore. Dragon slayers lose their sight, and dragon slayers get old. So it's not a space that I can always inhabit. But for a time, you can do that, and that dragon also would represent a certain kind of fear, but not fear of the wave. It's the fear of not being able to ride the wave. It's a fear of not being able to be out there. It's the fear of the day that comes when you can't do it. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. And here's where I want to go next with that. You're a man of Christ. You're passionately a devout Christian.
Yes.
Mesh how the two worlds come together, and I would like to know more about your understanding there, because from my own life, my own understanding of the fundamentals of Christianity, it's about the next life, and it's about the well, you pick it up from there.
Wow, deep questions. Yeah, that's good, hey. I like what you said in the introduction. Is if I would describe myself, also another way would be I'm a big wave philosopher, and for me, my journey of riding big waves has been an outworking of my faith, and the way that I may have described it to you in our previous conversation, but the way I describe it is I've experienced that there are thin places. Did I tell you that theory last time?
You did, but brief us again for those out there who might not have heard.
So a thin place is the place where the envelope between this world and the next thins, and it's in the proximity of death that the life within us is most affirmed. Like, those are my words. That's my best way of explaining it. And I guess another way would say, you go into these thin places where you get to feel that sense of exposure, and that sense of the possibility, where you can feel that that this world that we live in is temporary and passing, and that our part in it is tenuous and fragile, and yet we get to return from that thin place back into this life that we have, which is full of paying bills and picking the kids up from school, and getting a flat tire, your car flat tire, or having to buy sunscreen, or shooting interiors of airplanes. but one day we'll go to that thin place, and we'll pass through it, and we won't return to this world, you know, and it's like our life can continue. And for me, it's become like a way of understanding my faith. It's a way of passing through this thin place where I begin eternal life, and that eternal life for me is a it's a voluntary one, and it's a choice that I make in this life to expose myself to the teachings of Jesus through the Bible and through living in community with other people who have also spent time exposing themselves to the teaching of Jesus. And somehow that a decision that we make on this side to explore friendship with him, when we take that final journey, or when we finally cross over, it's like if we are still moving toward friendship with Jesus, that friendship will continue into eternity. Yeah.
When did you discover this in you, or were you raised this way?
So the thing about a journey of faith, Sean, I mean, I'm sure you understand this in some way, or perhaps this is new for you. I'm not sure where you are with your faith. But it's not a static thing. There's that phrase that says life has to be lived forwards, but can only be understood in reverse. So I've found that to be true with my faith. As a child, I experienced my faith in one way, and I experienced profound disappointment with it also, in a way that, in a sense, where I experienced a kind of hypocrisy in myself, and I rejected my faith. And then I later, sort of in my early 20s, I returned to my faith because I saw the evidence of a life so completely changed. A friend of mine, so completely changed that it gave me the courage to re-look at my Christian faith. And then, but the kind of faith that I came into there is a very different kind of faith to the way that I live it out now. It's you know, as you're a child and you grow up, you mature and you experience things differently. So initially, I thought that when I was age 20, that I had become a Christian for the first time. But as the years passed and I began to reflect on my upbringing in a different way, I realized that from my earliest memories, my parents were taking me to just a Sunday school. On Sunday, where I'd go to a very simple traditional church, where we would hear stories from the Bible, and those stories made sense to me. And when people told me those stories, I would have visuals for those stories, and those stories somehow went into the foundations of who I was as a person. So reflecting back on my journey, I would say I began my life with a deep longing and a curiosity about the person of Jesus, and what I would term as the mighty heroic stories of faith of the Old Testament were utterly intriguing to me. And then in my early 20s, I returned back to that, but at this time it was the person of it was the distinct person of Jesus that attracted me, because this friend of mine had been in such a terrible had been through such terrible life circumstances and situations that kind of and she was so profoundly broken and given over to the most terrible vices. And she one day went to church, and she told me, I've gone to church, and it was an irrelevant, didn't seem like anything that would make any difference to me. And yet what I saw was something that was hopeless, beginning to heal and have hope again. She began to change as a person, and she could forgive, not herself. She couldn't forgive herself for what she'd done, but in some inexplicable sense, she was able to receive forgiveness from even beyond herself. She was able to receive forgiveness, and that began for me just this rather complexifying journey of trying to understand what is forgiveness, and why is it so important that we receive this amazing forgiveness and live in that way toward others. And it continues to be my greatest struggle and greatest mystery: forgiveness between God and man, and between man and woman. How's that sound?
So it sounds amazing. So would the forgiveness be the bedrock of the faith?
Yeah, Sean, I mean, your questions are good. You're very good at this. Yeah, I would say at the white hot center of the universe would be the profound mystery that is forgiveness. Yeah, forgiveness between a God who created men and women, and the only way that we can have friendship with him would be some kind of transaction of forgiveness, that when received by us allows us into a friendship with him. Yeah. And yeah, so yeah, what could be of more utter intrigue, and then getting to know the God of the universe through this bizarre act of forgiveness.
And from what I'm hearing, it first starts with forgiveness of the self. You must know the self. You must know your pains. You must forgive yourself. You must be nice with yourself before you can then forgive others for maybe what you perceive others have done to you. And in that you find the peace. Do I have this right?
Yeah, that's pretty good. I mean, it's funny that you bring this up. This morning, walking on the beach, and I was listening to audio Bible, and the scripture that they were reading from was, I'm not sure where it is, but it was the Pharisees and teachers of the law coming to Jesus, and asking him and saying, what is the greatest law? And Jesus says, love the Lord your God with all your heart, your mind, and your strength, and love others as yourself. In these two commandments are fulfilled the entire law. And yeah, it's like we can't. I don't know if you've experienced this, Sean, if you've ever tried to. It's like, okay, let me take a dramatic example that I think of sometimes, like some terrible thing, like I'm in a hurry to get to, or I get to work, or I'm angry at something, and I reverse out the driveway, and I run over someone's child, and I kill them. So we've all heard that phrase, and I can never forgive myself for that. And I think all of us have some story like that where we can fix that in mind and say, if I did that, I could never forgive myself. And somehow there's like this justification of, yep, okay, sure, yeah, you can never, sure, like that's like something that's like, yeah, that's a thing you can. But that makes you God in your life. If you say, I could never forgive myself, because it's, we don't seek our own forgiveness. That makes us God. Do you know what I mean?
100%.
Like if I'm looking for my own forgiveness, that means everything comes down to me. If I decide to forgive myself, then it's kind of God, but it's, you go beyond yourself and you go like, so you look for God's forgiveness, and once you kind of have that, you find that the eyes come off yourself, and you look and you say, well, it looks like God has forgiven me. So you try to understand, not like forgiving yourself, but you try to understand what it's like when God forgives you. And with that comes an overwhelming sense of gratitude and friendship and relationship and trust. And then that somehow is meant to flow out into the other relationships in your life, which would be easy with your, in the best case scenario, with your wife and children and your closest friends. But it gets harder from there. It gets harder from, maybe it's the neighbor across my road who reverses and killed my child because they were drunk. And then it's like, no, I could never forgive that neighbor. That must rot in hell or whatever. But then the Christian faith says, no, I've forgiven you. You can forgive that guy too. So it's the repercussions of it go out with very, very, very difficult and miraculous, some of the things that we're asked to forgive.
I want to come back to this on a larger macro scale, but you touch upon something here that I want to take to the ethos of surfing, and
Yes.
and that is when you surf a wave, it fills you with so much.
Yes.
You're almost like a god. You feel
Yes.
godly. Okay.
Yes, got it.
And the act of standing on a surfboard makes you feel this way. You come from a position before you go to that space where you have already accepted that you are not God, and the God is out there. In the culture of surfing, do you think the egos you find in the world of surfing, is that the root of it? The fact that you just are so confident that you've just conquered this thing out in the ocean that fills you with godly like feelings. And I would like to know what you think about that concept there regarding surf culture as a whole, because almost part of the ethos of being a surfer is just like, I'm the shit. And how does that work in the world as you see it in the people that you've been around and in the surf world that you've met so many people in?
Yeah. So I mean, the most sort of like obvious or tangible evidence of that would be some form of localism, perhaps. You're saying where maybe like somebody in particular would say, "This is my place. These are my waves," and then that sense of ownership gets even amplified because they can now ride these waves in a better way than you, or at least, they can have the best waves. Yeah, I think it's I mean, I obviously I have a real problem with that, and it's probably the reason why I will never claim local status anywhere. This sense of ownership, it's of a place belonging to you. It does inflate that kind of God, that sense of this is mine, and I can control these waves, or I am somehow these waves are mine. I think I mean that the person who primarily damages is the person, and I mean, you just got to think back to the terrible tragic story of, are you aware of Sonny Garcia?
Absolutely. I have a picture
So,
of him right over there.
Yeah.
He's on the wall. Yeah. That
Oh,
famous
man.
Billabong quote. Here, let me bring it over there. Dude, look at this guy. Look at that. Only
Oh
a
man.
surfer knows the feeling, is what it says. And I had
Yes,
that on
surfer
my
knows the
wall.
feeling.
I had that on my wall
Wow.
12, and I still live with it today. Sonny Garcia, I met him. I had the pleasure of meeting him one time here at our local beach. He came to town. Great,
Wow.
great dude. West side of Hawaii. But continue.
Yeah, wow. So I mean, perfect example then. We think of Sonny Garcia, who when the worst version of him, represented a very aggressive form of localism, very, very confrontational, very, yeah, and this sense of entitlement, I suppose. And then and now it's a guy who faced the most terrible sadness that can overcome a human heart, where you despair of life, and where you think my only way out would be to decide when I die. And then and instead someone who wasn't able to take his life but now lives kind of, yeah, I mean, he's physically handicapped, mentally and physically handicapped, and as far as I understand, and it's a terrible it's a terrible way to leave this world. But it's an extreme example of, like, we are not gods. Those are not our waves. That's not our place. We are just we're passing through. It's something that we get to do, and yeah, we get to stand on water, but we're not Jesus.
So you've been to Hawaii, and
Yeah,
Hawaii was just overtaken by the U.S. military 100 years ago. A little longer than 100 years ago. We marched in there with our
yeah,
Marines, and we said to the Queen, we said, "Hey, we're going to kill all your soldiers, or
mm,
or this is it." And she said, "All right, I don't want any of my soldiers to be killed." So they have a very recent history of this, and before
yeah,
that they ruled the Pacific for thousands of years. And like, I almost can kind of give the Hawaiian culture a pass on the localism,
yeah.
because that's where
I
it
can,
comes from. I
yeah,
understand, but I mean,
yeah,
honestly, like, I've been to Hawaii
yeah.
16 times, and I've never had a
Wow.
problem with one Hawaiian person, because I come from a spirit of aloha, just like they do. And I think the machismo is what they don't like, and that's when
Mm,
you get the front of the localism.
yeah,
um and
yeah.
and like, I want to, like, if you want to comment on that, but I also then want to tie it to this macro problem we have in the world. But maybe if you want to say something about that before I connect this.
No, I agree. I think it's important to acknowledge that there is a good side, a very good side to localism, too, which is exactly what you just described, which looks like a um, which looks like honoring your elders, um, um, and acknowledging that there's a way of doing things, and that sharing is sharing is caring, and that's, yeah, I mean, yeah, what you described is like a macro version of First Nation people, who have a resource, and people from the outside coming in and taking that resource, whether it be diamonds or coal or trees or waves, and disrespecting the culture of the people in the place. So I think what you described is a good thing too.
So let's go back to the forgiveness. And
Mm,
I want to go, essentially, I mean, you do a lot of work with United Arab Emirates. Uh, you
okay.
spent you spent a lot of time in Dubai a few weeks
Yes.
ago, and
Yes.
before we go there, particularly, I want to
Yeah.
just I want to know your macro perspective on that region of the world, because
Oh wow. Yes.
standing
Bring
here
it.
in America, we
Yeah.
we get a very
Yeah.
it's a lot of noise, and
Yeah.
you're coming from South Africa, which has such
Yeah.
a deep history of its own, that is complex, and then you go and you've put yourself for years in these other parts of the world. I would like to just kind of get your worldview first
Oh
on
nice.
that region, and
Nice.
and
Yeah.
how you view it from its
Nice.
complexity.
Nice. Good question. Oh my gosh, I'd love to answer this question. Thank you, Sean. Very nice. Yeah, speaking about the Middle East, and obviously at the moment it's world news, terrible conflict between Palestine and Israel. Indeed, Sean, since I was 19, I've been going to the Middle East, traveling on my own. I'm 48 now. So first to Israel as a boy, and then over to, I'm not a boy, but I mean a 19-year-old, and then over to Egypt, arrested by the Egyptian police. Almost spent a few, almost went off the radar, possibly permanently there, but by an intervention of God, I was released, and I've been returning there. I've been returning there ever since. So I have a lot of experience in the Middle East, and having worked there, and yeah, traveled around many of the different countries there. Yeah, and then yeah, this the conference that you alluded to now, which was the COP28, which is the United Nations conference on climate change, which was led by the United Arab Emirates, Dubai. And it was a profound experience that for me plays in very well into what's happening in the conflict in the Middle East, and then ties into my faith too. When I was in Israel at age 19, before I saw the miraculous turnaround of my friend, I was in Israel not for any reason other than just to have an adventure and work in a kibbutz. But I was walking down a road in the center of Jerusalem one day, and I had abandoned my faith, my childhood faith, and I had no interest, and I was in fact aggressively against it. And I looked up on the wall, and there was a plaque on the wall, and it said, "At this point, Jesus stopped to speak to the two Samaritan women." And it's a purely religious, symbolic thing. You could never know if that was ever the actual exact geographic point. But I remember for the first time in my life thinking, wow, Jesus was standing here. Jesus walked down like on the street. And it was, so I very much like an awareness of faith returned back to me, the reality of it all in the Middle East. So I have a profound connection to it, and I feel a deep affinity for the Muslim faith too, and for the Hebrew faith, really. When clumped together, you must know this, or maybe don't, or maybe, but I mean, it's called the three Abrahamic faiths come together, of which we share many parts of our faith. You know, the terrible irony of this war that's happened in the States against terrorism and stuff, and with Islam being held up as the great evil, is that there's far more in common that we have with Islam as Christians than we do that is uncommon, especially in a world that is increasingly secular and anti-faith. So, I mean, there's a the distinct difference between that are many, but there's far more in similar. So having, in my many years of working in the Middle East, I have developed a real affinity for the Muslim faith, just an appreciation for the similarities with us. You know, like I love how family based the Muslim culture is. I love how generous they are, genuinely generous, humble, very humble, kind, empathetic, compassionate. Obviously, I'm speaking about the good side. There's a bad side to my faith. There's a good side to, like that. But I'm talking about the generous, kind, empathetic, family values, intellectual, great legacy going back. So, having, working in the Middle East, I've also been around. I was speaking about it this morning. I remember a couple of years ago when Israel was bombing Lebanon, or was it Lebanon they're bombing? I mean, they've bombed a few places. But, one of the conflicts that they were involved in, and the front page of the newspaper was printed a picture of some Israeli girls, and they were drawing on the bombs that were being sent into this Arab state. I think it was actually one of the Palestinian conflicts, and for me it was truly one of the most profoundly evil, horrifying scenes. And I thought about, because there's this phrase that gets thrown around a lot. It's like the Israelis are God's chosen people. And I thought about it and I was like, wow. And I thought, if Jesus can love the Israeli people, he can love anybody. It's kind of like they're a macro of all of us. We're all capable of the worst kinds of evil and the best kind of acts of good. And it's like it's like the Israeli people represent that. And what makes them God's chosen people is not that they are the special tribe that are untouchable, but it's just that they were the tribe that God chose that Jesus, the Messiah, would be born into. And that makes them God's chosen people. And he made a promise to them. So it's not about them being this untouchable special nation that can do what they want. It's about God's faithfulness, who keeps his promises. The same way that you love your children or I love my children, whether they're doing the right thing or the wrong thing, there's this unconditional love, and you keep your promise regardless of that. So that's my way of understanding in one way this terrible behavior, of Israel, what's happening at the moment, and this amazing faithfulness, or this kind of thing that we have as Christians of these people who are behaving so badly, still being the chosen people. And then also my faith offers the most simplistic explanation of what's happening in Palestine and Israel too, which is a sibling, like a sibling rivalry, a sibling fallout that happened between two brothers, which was Abraham and Sarah were traveling through the desert, and God spoke to Sarah and Abraham and said, I'm going to give you a son. And Sarah laughed and she said, how can I have a child? I'm like 80 or something, 85. Well, I still have pleasure now. And they waited 20 years, for this child to come along. But in the meantime, they thought, we got to, like, this isn't going to happen. It's not going to come through Sarah. So rather, Sarah gave her maidservant Hagar over to Abraham, which was the tradition at the time. If a man had intercourse with a woman's maidservant, then the child would become like the child of the father, and it would become it would become Sarah's child too. It would no longer be the child of Hagar or the Hagar. So that was Ishmael. Ishmael was born first, and then eventually came along Isaac, who was the child of the promise. And what began as Ishmael hated Isaac. And it began then over 2,500 years ago, however long ago, like this terrible hatred between these two nations. And so when you look at it now, it's this horrible conflict of two nations that hate each other and have these hundreds of years worth of hate toward each other, of which there is only one solution, which is the same for the whole of mankind, which is the white hot burning center of the universe and everything, which is forgiveness. So it's, it could be an overly reductionist view, but I mean, that's the beauty of my faith. It's that children could understand, and I can explain that to a 4-year-old, and they could understand that. or some of the greatest minds of, you know, that have ever lived could also understand that in a different way if they chose to, you know. But that's how I choose to see it. Two people groups so desperately hurt, hating each other, fighting, you know, as the worst kind of sibling fallouts, you know, as you would have experienced, I've experienced, just terrible sibling fallout, of which, you know, when you look at it from an outsider, you say, oh man, can't you guys just say sorry and forgive each other and hug it out and work together? You know, your brothers or your sisters, or you know, you guys are more similar than you dissimilar, all that. That's a big answer. Does that kind of answer it? Is there anything there that
Yeah,
you
you laid the land very very strongly, and I want to go to the present moment, or a few months ago. The UN Climate Summit
yeah
2023 was post October
yeah
7th, I believe, right? It was after
yeah
the invasion. So you were there shoulder to shoulder with
yep
the biggest world leaders
yeah
and the biggest in
yeah
Dubai. Um,
yep
what was that mood like, and what did you see hope for this forgiveness? And aside from the religious nature of the
yeah
conflict, do you see it almost more as what we were talking about before, as just everyone's fighting for resources, and it's more about material than it is spiritual?
um yeah look, I'm as per your introduction, I'm a big wave surfer, photographer, and a common man's philosopher, and I'm a man of faith. So I'm not very clever. I have wisdom in certain areas, but what I do is I try to rely on this sense of discernment, or the sense of like a gut feeling of like what are things going on here, or what do we think, or how do you take this all this information and come to a sense of like, God, what, like, won't you just give me something that I can understand, that I can steer by, or that can be a truth that a simple man like me can understand. So at this conference, I was assigned um, to follow one of the main ambassadors at the conference, who is from the United Nations. And before we arrived at the conference, right there, you know, we flew in from South Africa to go and be part of this media team. There were 50 of us. And just as we were leaving the airport, there was this video that came up on CNN or whatever, and it was of the main guy, Dr. Sultan, and he was standing up there, and what they had was like, Dr. Sultan, this guy, he's heading up the whole conference. He's a what they call him, the not the president, anyway, but I mean, he was the head of the whole conference. He was chairing the whole conference, and they said, this guy's there to make oil deals. This guy, you know, like, this guy's a fake. Like, that was the vibe. Arriving, this whole thing's discredited. So we arrive like this, and this, no, that's what we go in on, and it seems like a farce. It's being held in a country where the primary economy, in a big way, comes from oil and gas. So it's like, oh, what a farce, you know, having in this place, these guys are just rich, they're doing this. So I'm not an environmentalist by any stretch of the imagination. In fact, I've been profoundly against it in some ways because of the negative side of it I've seen. Negative side would be catastrophizing, a kind of negativity, a kind of aggression, a antinatalism, which would be like against, you know, people having children. This kind of sense that like the earth is somehow bigger than God, and the earth, people must die, and so that the earth can now heal itself, Mother Nature thing, you know. So it's in a way, it's like environmentalism to me almost became like a religion for people who had abandoned their faith, like a sort of new world religion you know, that discredits like a creator who sung creation into being, as C.S. Lewis describes it in Narnia, singing this beautiful thing, like there was darkness and he sings and the sun begins to, the horizon glows and you start to see things growing and the sound and the very air itself vibrates and creatures are sung into existence, you know. So that's far more, yeah, I like that, you know, that's where I come from. That's my faith background. So anyway, so we go into this conference on this ground and I'm like, all right, I'm following one of these main ambassadors around and I'm within touching distance of some of the world's most important like leaders, world leaders. Love you, my daughter. My daughter just blew a kiss through the door. So important world leaders, and I'm following around like one of the main ambassadors, and I'm like, what's going on here? What do we go? And I'm going into rooms full of like bankers, the people who, these hundreds of billions of dollars that are being funneled into the environmentalist movement or trying to be pledged to. These are the guys who are actually handling the funds, handling the money, and big industry leaders and like world leaders from dictators who would have been in military regimes where they literally would have shot hundreds of people with AK-47s up to whatever, you know, just these crazy spaces, and First Nation people still dressed in traditional dress with paint on their faces, and fisherwomen who are there crying, begging for help because they're like, you know, they now have got to migrate over to Australia because their island, the water's seeped up, they can't grow their plants. Just this crazy cacophony of humanity and money, and I'm going in and out of these rooms with these people sitting in small environments, and I'm like, geez, God, you're the only person I can talk to here. Like, how do I, like, why am I here? What am I doing here? What's like, you have to help me to discern and understand what, you know, what I'm hearing. You know, are these, you know, I'm a simple man, and it's like, are these good guys or bad guys? Like, is this right or wrong? What am I hearing? And it was you know, the Arab guy that I was following around, I was like, okay, I don't know if this guy's got Asperger's. I don't know, you know, not that's a bad thing, but I mean, Asperger's, you know, comes with its own set of, you know, a distinct way of moving through the world. So I don't know if he's got Asperger's. I don't know if people are kissing his ass. I don't know if he's like doing some deals. I don't know, like, is this good guy, bad guy? Is he a liar? Is he a crook? Is he a whatever, you know? And he's saying a lot of the same thing over and over again. And I'm trying to discern, and everybody's using the same stuff. And eventually we go into one of these rooms with it where it's academics and journalists, and there's this thing. It's called, you see, I'm not clever enough to remember the term, but it's a legal term which means it's like Clapton House rules or something. It's Hamilton House, something like that. But it's like, which means that you can't quote what people say in the room. So it's like what they say, yeah, you can speak freely. And what this guy did was he put down his paper and he spoke freely. And he started to speak, and he started to tell people about stories about poor people. He started to tell stories about places he'd gone where he'd met the least and the lowest who were most affected by climate change. And I was like, whoa, what's going on here? And I went over to one of his aides in the corner, and I was like, dude, what's going on here? What's this guy saying? Like, does he really care about poor people? Like, how can he talk like this now? Is this for real? And his aide says to me, yeah. He says, you know, for the last year that he's been traveling, he said, this guy's tired, man. The ambassador's tired. He's been all over the world. He's met with all kinds of, been to, and he said, yeah, he cares. He really cares about poor people. And, you know, for it was in that moment that it started to turn around for me, where climate change became not just about degrees or big money or making change or spotting the next thing, but it became about standing up for the poor. And I suddenly realized that this guy cares about the poor, and Jesus cares about the poor. Jesus came for the least and the lowest. Jesus said the meek shall inherit the earth. And it was on that moment that it started to spin for me, where I thought, wow, these Arab guys have been discredited for the longest time by the world. They were camel herders 2 generations ago. They had nothing. It was just sand. Everybody knows their money's been sucked out the ground in oil. And there's been terrible excesses that they've done, and the terrible human, tragedy, particularly around women and children in those areas. But at the same time, it's not really like that. It's changing fast in those areas. But these guys are standing up for the little guy. Like, these guys have been discredited, but these guys have got their eyes on the future, and these guys are going to make the big ships turn around. These guys are going to actually hold these big nations accountable for the pledges that they're making. And there were many firsts in that meeting. There were people that had been invited into the room for the first time. Like I cited that story of the fisherwoman who arrived, whose island was sinking. And it was the first time that had a room full of First Nation people, where the top guys came in and sat and listened to their stories, and they were represented. It was the first time that they had various high-level meetings within the actual conference, not outside of the conference. And these Arab guys are taking it to the man. They're taking it to the big man. And the thing about the Arab nations is they still have a faith background, an Abrahamic faith background. I'm rounding it off now. An Abrahamic faith background that comes with a set of principles. Is the sense that there is life after this life, or there's consequence, there is eternal consequence, or there is a creator, or there's something bigger, that we are not God. There you go. Tying it into to the story of Sunny Garcia or surfing. Like, they still carry into the room this deep reverence, the sense that there is a God and we're not him. Sure. Said a lot.
Did you get the sense at the end of the conference that anything was accomplished that was going to actually change the environment? And I'm not a scientist, you're not a scientist, but I study the science of it, and there's a predominant discussion that the damage has been done, and any of this trying to change carbon footprints and whatnot is a futile effort. That's, like you said at the start of your talk, what is really about, like, just manipulating money and who's got the power. So at the end, and because I was following you on the Instagram, I was listening to the news coming out of the event, and they went an extra day because they were still negotiating. And then at the end of it, they were like, well, if that finished, and there was a blueprint, but no final thing was made. So everyone left without there being a big deal. And at the end of the day, you have behemoths like China and the United States that are going to do what they're going to do. Like, I live here in America, and the United States, they're going to, the powers that be are going to do their thing. So, like, how did you come out of it?
Oh, that's good. That's good. So the big business of the future, it's very uninspiring. Okay, like the outcome. Basically, there will be massive climate change. These big changes will be made, but not for the reasons that a lot of the environmentalists want. It's because it's big business. It's the business of the future. It's great ideas. It's inspiring. Like, it's the next practical step. The resources are limited. It's going to happen. So it's happening. With regards to the with climate change, what my ambassador said what they said in that room on the side, one of the main scientists, what they said is, we had a lot of pressure before this event even started to throw out the main byline of the whole event, which is keep the dream of 1.5 alive, which is like, that's the temperature. Like, you don't want global temperature to increase beyond 1.5. you know, what their main scientist said is, he's like, you know, it's gone beyond that already. But so it's now like it's a call sign. It's not a, you know, my understanding was that it's no longer a scientific reality that we got to keep it below, because it's already gone beyond that. But what I found very inspiring in there was, you know, I thought climate change was all about stopping having children, letting poor people die, you know, letting the rich people kind of become richer and live, and sort of trying to everybody become these godless or these faithless first world countries. But instead, the reality is far more inspiring than that. You know, like excuse me for not remembering his name, but the president of Brazil was one of the heroes there of the thing, because they've, you know, Brazil's managed to reduce deforestation by 80%, which is like, I was like, what? But Brazil are the bad guys, but they're not. You know, the thing is, they're doing it. So with the environmentalist movement, like one of the things that makes me so unhappy about it is, it's like there's this, do it now, fix it, you're the bad guys, like these are the, like this is the, like it's there's a lot of villainization and attacking, and it's got to do now and change, but like the ship is turning around, and it's turning around very slowly. It's a big ship to turn around, but yeah, I mean, the ship's turning around, and the inspiring reality is, you know, climate change, one of the biggest things that they need to affect climate change is they need more forests, and they need a healthy ocean, which is like, wow, that's amazing. Okay, more forests, that's good. And one of the big things that they're advocating for is with the First Nation people. The First Nation people were there saying, we've always lived close to the land, we've lived close to people, we haven't used more than what we need, we haven't polluted our water sources, we haven't done this or that, we've always found solutions for stuff. You know, we've had as many children as God gave us, but we still haven't, you know, overdone it. It's like, let us handle our own resources, like include us in the conversation. Don't come take us off our land, destroy our land, and destroy our culture. Which is like that's like, oh wow, that's humanitarian, that's looking after people. Like I can get that, you know. So I came away inspired by the big business models. I came away inspired by the role that you know, not the role that women are playing in their own, but the role that men and women together are playing. You know, that interplay between masculine and feminine, or male and female, you know, working together. Adam and Eve, you know, originally had the garden, looking after the garden and looking after resources, and with reverence for creation, without confusing creation for the creator, working together. It's incredibly inspiring, you know. And so I just wanted to just come out. I want to tell another, that there's fisherwomen that I keep returning to. So as a photographer, I grew up in this cliche that, you know, a beautiful woman looks a certain way. And let me tell you, this fisherwoman who delivered the story about, I'm a First Nation fisherwoman and my nation's sinking. She was a thick, heavy set woman with just big bone, big faces, almost male looking in many ways. But she was the personification of everything that's beautiful about a woman and femininity, like emotionally articulate, in touch with her emotions. She wept, like most of us in that room wept. She spoke about being a mother and reverencing the place that she's from with tremendous humility. And it was, you know, there were all kinds of inspiring stories like that, where I saw men and women coming together to figure out a solution for climate change that is very human and inspiring.
So good and deep. Thank you. What's the camaraderie like amongst you and the other photographers at an event like that? Are you guys talking, or are there others, or are you the, like, what's the culture
So there are career guys who do this the whole time, and you can see those guys, and they, they've got a certain kind of gear, they've got a look, a way of moving and understanding, and for them it's a job. And it was a job for me because I was getting paid, but it was the first time I'd done something like that. So for me, it was a masterclass in storytelling and communication. So, you can see some of the guys are like tired, or they're kind of half in, half out watching, or but whereas for me, like when a First Nation person or someone of a different language would speak, I would go and get one of those headsets, because what are they saying? I would shoot, and then I would listen, and then there were other people in there with me who also, where it was their first time doing it, and it was that experience. There's for us, there was a crew of filmmakers, and the filmmakers and storytellers, who got out of it, was always very inspiring. There were 5 of us who would drive back every night, sharing our stories from the event, and reflecting and processing it. Then we'd go to like a cheap Indian restaurant, we would eat like the hottest curries we could eat, and we would swap stories and talk about the highs and lows from the day. What was the high point? Liam would say, Liam says, "Oh man, I arrived and I was running from somewhere and I was sweating, and there were some girls there and they laughed at me sweating, and that was his low point." I'd be like, "Oh, jeez, that's heavy, bro." Or someone would say like, the speech that someone gave, and then, or the high point would say, "Man, we got a chance to, tell the story of our faith to somebody." Those were the high points for me. I had amazing opportunities to speak about my faith to people who also had an interest in faith. Or sometimes it would be like, "Man, I got this unbelievable shot. I was backed into the corner like this, that, I didn't know where my people were. The brief was off, and I was just feeling despondent about this whole thing. And then around the corner, comes this guy, and he's wearing his First Nation Brazilian tribe, and he's wearing the headdress, and he's being followed by, and like that, So we had tremendous camaraderie and talking and verbal processing, and it was amazing. It was amazing, Sean. I highly recommend it.
Well, let me say, I'm originally from Washington, D.C. I'm a connoisseur of news photographs. I've grown up with the Washington Post in its physical form, and your photographs that you posted on Instagram were very, very unique, and I could tell your interest there, where you're following the story and how you frame the shot, and specifically the photos you chose to post really hit home and brought me, without really knowing before that much about the event, to the event. And I just want to give you a big ups there, because that was really really sick. Your other work is also extremely sick, but that was the first time I saw you shoot people, particularly, and in such a international environment. So shouts out, big ups.
Incredible affirmation, Brew, and that speaks very much to my career at the moment, because there's a real quandary with the sense of, at age 48, feeling, do I really want to keep selling cheese or seats on an airplane or new cars or trainers? Like where I want to tell great stories. I really, that's my drive. I want to tell great stories till I die, really. So that's, I've been thinking about that deeply, and that's why that job was a real crossing over for me. I got to do something where I was like, yeah, I think I want to do this more.
Well, I think everyone in today's time is searching for something that the AI cannot do, and that particularly is something the AI cannot do, is read the emotions of a scene. And bro, like even your photographs of the insides of the airplane can't be recreated in the AI. And I would like to know, like those environments, you've said before how you play with light, but you can't teach this kind of stuff. It is true art, and you as the artist make these decisions in tough time, under lots of pressure. How do you deal with that as a creator?
Oh wow. So
and before you go, I'm sorry to interrupt you. it goes to confidence, and confidence in your in like your abilities, and
yeah.
yeah, that's go.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. Okay. So I would credit my mom and dad with that. You know that. Um, it was my mom. My mom used to take the kind of photos growing up as kids that captivated me, because when I would look at the pictures there, she had an incredible ability to capture the moment. You know, how the way you just described my pictures at COP21, that comes straight out of my mom, looking through the photo albums, you know, where it's like her timing was always impeccable. You know, you had 24 frames and you had to get them. But when you look through our family albums as kids, like, you really get the sense of the place and the people, and the timing, and a sense of reverence for the moment and humanity, really. So I like, it's the first time I've said that, but yeah, you know, I would say from my mom. And then what I got from my dad is my dad imparted to me this immutable, irrefutable sense of confidence, way beyond my ability. It was just like, I can do this, bro. I can do this. Like creative confidence, creative problem-solving confidence, in many different ways. You know, like, they just, whatever, they permitted me to ride my bicycle a very long distance to school when I was just a little boy. You know, and that imparted a sense of confidence. You know, whenever, like, low points, my dad was always like, you know, you're the same as them, you can do this. And that flowed over into my photography. So my primary sense, my primary skill set as a photographer is my, I'll use the word again, I've used it a lot, my reverence for the story, and I'm definitely not an artist. I don't like, I'm not artistic. I'm a creative problem solver. I'm a visual creative problem solver, and I love to make people happy with my pictures. I love to get the best version of what's really there, and somehow integrated with that is the same big match temperament that comes with big waves. Like, the bigger the occasion, the more I can rise up. You know, I've learned how to read the room. I've learned how to talk to people, you know, who are high station, the same as people who are low station. I've learned how to engage people. I'm deeply interested in people, genuinely interested in their lives, and that allows me to engage with people I'm photographing. I'm by no means a marketing network guy at all. In fact, it works against me, because I'm so interested in people that, you know, I'd rather have friendship with someone than try and tap them for a work contact. So it doesn't translate like that. But when I get to know somebody, like, I really like them, and I care for them, and I'm interested in them, and that skill set that came from my mom's ability to capture moment, my dad's sense of, like, creative confidence, and then my ability to engage people and interested in their stories, has meant that I have stayed interested in trying to tell great stories with my photographs. And yeah, that's what, you know, hopefully that's, as you said, you know, I think AI is the most unbelievable tool. I absolutely love AI Photoshop. It's amazing, you know, but it can only, you know, only use it to make real life look better, I suppose, or something, but not to recreate things. But yeah, AI could never take that skill set that I described, which is a love and a reverence for humanity and people, and telling great stories.
What is the next great story you want to tell?
Whew, you good. Blasted. Oh, I want to, bro. If I could have my way, man, I don't know how it's going to happen. If I could have my way, I would spend the rest of my life telling the stories about Jesus. It is the greatest story. And every single human being who's ever lived and ever will live, you know, if they meet with God or they have a journey with God, I mean, that story is a profound, beautiful, like it's the greatest story of all time. You know, and the way that's the way that God works in people's lives, the things you can survive, the things you can forgive and overcome, like it's just, it's, yeah. I don't know how I'm going to do it, Sean, but I would love to make Jesus movies and tell Jesus stories in a brand new way that doesn't currently exist. I don't know how that's going to happen.
So good. So before I move on to my next little thing I'd like to talk about, like what what's the wall look like full of spaghetti in that regard? Like are these picture movies, or are there actors? Is it cartoons? Like what how do you want to I'm trying to visualize your method.
How do you do it? Yeah, how do you do it when I say in ways that don't currently exist? I mean, maybe that's I mean, that's not true. It's I mean, maybe it's like ways that currently don't exist, meaning like stories that haven't yet been told, that are like an unending amount of these stories, you know, with like eternal value. So okay, so I mean, so definitely, I mean, it's amazing that you've tapped into those cop pictures and those cop stories, because that's exactly, I would love to try to figure out how to make Jesus movies, real life documentary Jesus movies, with real people, that are like those kinds of photographs. Something that is otherworldly, authentic, completely tangible, like completely real, personal, but not scripted, but still curated in a way, like, you know, like they say about, there's a quote that Jordan Peterson says about, he says, he's talking about public speaking, and he says, public speaker, if you want to give a great public speech, like a really great talk, you've got to prepare 3 times the amount of content that you need, and you've got to never know how it's going to end or where it's going. He says, like, people must always feel like there's a possibility of you blowing it, you know, because he said the writers of the great novels never knew how their stories were going to finish. So when you start reading a book, you never want to know how it's going to finish. You don't want to, like, from the first few pages, if you go, I see where this is going, you're going to put it down. You know, some of the best movies that you and I have watched have been like, oh yeah, whoa, I never saw that coming. That's amazing. You got to watch this movie. It's got this twist. So I would love to make movies like that where I don't know how they're going to end, you know. I mean, you could just say, sure, cool, boo, that's a documentary. But it's a documentary, and it's something other, which somehow you're tracking with somebody as the story of God unfolds in their life, somehow toward an outcome that is not predetermined, you know, an outcome that could end up as a complete failure, or could end up looking like my friend who's in Hawaii now, who I started the story with, you know, the young guy's in Hawaii and who's now there, and the waves hasn't come, and now he's got to come back with his family, not having been at Jaws event. You know, it's like his story could end with him winning the Jaws event, or it could end up with him coming home, having ridden one wave at Jaws, and like going, oh, you know, like not knowing how it's going to go, like, and yet somehow God is the author of Matthew's story because he has a profound Jesus faith, and he sought him before he went. So it's like, I want God to let me in on his stories, what he's doing in people's lives. You know? I don't know how you do that, Sean. I don't know, Brie.
Well, let me like where you're taking me. We live in a modern time. This thing that we're doing right now, this long form discussion is gaining popularity, but it's for the most intellectual. It's someone who can hold a
Yes,
a thing in
agreed.
their mind for a long time. So if you're listening to this now, shouts out to you. You know, we're an hour and a half into it,
Made it this far.
and yeah, you made this far. Big ups. You know, my kids, like when they're allowed to get on the tablets, they're watching YouTube Shorts,
Yeah,
and
yeah, yeah,
and
yeah.
and that's a new medium that I'm trying to explore as an artist. You have made some amazing movies that have won awards. So you have a box in your mind of how to put great movies
Mm.
out there. What is your philosophy on very short form movies? And does the short form maybe hold a place in
Mm.
what you were previously just describing?
Yeah, 100%. We just shot a whole ad campaign around South Africa where we went to, where we went to 20 different locations and captured 25-second clips.
Wow.
That was, yeah, and that's the campaign. And it still had all the travel logistics, all the production logistics, all the, still propagate like everything, but for like a 5-second clip, not a 5-second clip made up of a whole bunch of clips, but like 1 5-second clip, like continuous coming in. This is
Well, let me time you out there. So in the process of doing that, how many clips did you make for the one where you were like, that's it? Like
yeah. Well,
because
Sean, there was one where we had 3 tries and we had to choose one. And and that was an obvious one because that was we went to Khoritz River Bridge, which is on the Garden Route, which is the world's biggest commercial bungee jump. It sounds corny, but I mean it was like we had our guy, one of my friends, we strapped him in. We got strapped in, we had to lean over him and we had to do the shot of him, falling out of frame down into the valley below, on a bungee jump, but make it not look like. Anyway, and that's it. So he was only able to do it twice, and then we got a guy to do like a run through. But then, so that's it, and then some of them we had like maybe 30 or 40 takes on them. But yeah, there is definitely like that short form. If you can do both, I mean, it's, as a photographer, I have to tell a complete story in like 1 frame, never mind like 5 seconds. So still like 5 seconds for me is still like, whoa, how'd I fill 5 seconds? Never mind full length documentary. I'm like, holy smokes, I can't plan that. Like I can't storyboard. I can't the route I just described to you is like almost the only route I can take, which is like be led. So yeah, short form's powerful, very difficult.
very difficult.
Mm.
Parenting.
Yes.
How does parenting you're very busy. You have many passions. How do you balance up being a great parent with doing you also?
Yeah, that's good, eh? It's funny. I was wondering if I'd tell the story. I thought about it before I came in. I thought, anyway, it's a parenting story. So one of the best examples I've had of parenting, the parenting style that I've taken approach, is there's an American band. They're called Switchfoot, and they're surfers and they're California based, but they were out here in 2012 and they're shooting a full-length documentary and doing a world tour. And I met them and I surfed with them and I actually took them into big waves. Big wave surfing. We had an amazing thing. I ended up in their documentary movie. It's called Fading West, but it's like a beautiful movie. And they made an album while doing it. So it was lovely. But in the process of this, like the guys they are Christians, okay? And so it was, in a sense, it was the first time that I'd spent time with, like full like Christian rock stars, literally like that. They at the time they were playing very big venues and they'd won a Grammy, anyway. And as I spent time with them, like the main guy, particularly a guy called John Foreman, I spent time with him and I got to ask him a question. We spent we surfed big waves and then Tim and I just drove and I said to him, bro, how do you like, how do you feel God in these things? How do you handle sort of, people looking at you in a certain way, which is completely disconnected to who you are in reality, just reverencing you for your gift and who you are, and he said, sometimes, he says, sometimes it happens when I'm on stage and I'm in the middle of a show and we're singing, and I will see, he said, and I saw a girl in the front row who was in a wheelchair. And he said, as I was performing and singing, he said, I started to cry. And he says, while I'm singing and I'm performing and I'm saying in my head, I'm praying and I'm praying and I'm saying, God, why now? Why do you want to overwhelm me with this now? And John had a few other stories like that, but I guess what that launched in me was like, it gave me a very clear sense of, like, when I was a teenager, like I told that story, that I reached this point where I was like, there's this hypocrisy in me that I don't like, a difference between my faith and me, how I behave, on the weekends or when I'm angry or whatever. And I didn't want that for my children. I wanted them this integrated kind of faith that I experience now and that John had just described. And he went back to the band went back to LA a little while after, like that, and by hook or by crook, some unbelievable set of circumstances, 2 weeks later I wound up in where was it? It's Santa Cruz, maybe, in the States, at a dinner party with his parents. So it was 2 weeks later. It was unbelievable. So anyway, a long story, but and I said to his parents, I was like, okay, you have my full attention. I was with your son 2 weeks ago in South Africa. I saw something in both of your sons because, John and Tim are both in the band and they've both got this incredibly integrated whole thing where they're successful, they're accomplished, they're skilled, but they love and they give and they're kind and they say sorry and their faith is who they are, and they're not out there necessarily always singing Jesus songs like in the lyrics, but who they are flows out of that, etc. And I had a conversation with them and they explained their parenting style to me, and the story that his dad told me was, he said one day I came in and they were playing Stairway to Heaven in their bedroom on their guitars. I'd just become a Christian. And I said, that's the devil's music. Stairway to Heaven is terrible. You can't play that stuff. And I turned it off and I took their guitars away. And I went away and I thought about it for a bit and I kind of prayed about it. And I was like, no. He said, I went back in the next day and he said, all right, guys, here are the guitars. This is how you, because he was also in a band. This is how you play Stairway to Heaven. I'm going to teach you to play Stairway to Heaven, but I'm also going to teach you to interpret the lyrics. So my parenting style is based around that. It's like my girls they're so wholesome. They're kind, they're empathetic, they're brave, they're courageous, they're sad, they cry when they're sad, they tell the truth, they say sorry when they tell a lie, they're emotionally articulate, they're astute, many things, and at the center of them is a deep, profound friendship with God, which doesn't come from me, but comes from some facilitated environment where I've taught them how to play Stairway to Heaven in life and interpret the lyrics, try to what is right and wrong, how does our faith work, to the best of my understanding of it, that they are somehow people of value, not a religious faith, but a faith that looks more like a friendship.
Beautiful. Now, before we wrap up, you know, I end these podcasts with the question of the meaning of life. I've asked you this before. Has it changed?
Say that again. The what?
The meaning of life.
The meaning of life. Oh man, yeah, for sure. Hey, it hasn't changed, but let me try. I'll probably answer it slightly differently. Maybe in context of this what I've just said now, you know, in this podcast, the theme of it, and you know, the struggle that I face daily, would be, I would say, the meaning of life is forgiveness. Forgiveness, between receiving the forgiveness that a loving God has given us, unmerited, unearned forgiveness, and the terribly frustrating, difficult, heartbreaking, rip-roaringly funny, challenging, great, mystical process of passing that forgiveness on to others.
Epic, Dougal. Man, like every time I speak with you, I go to another level, and today we went to a glorious high level. I can't thank you enough for your time. Any content I see out there that you're in, I consume it. I love your posts. If anyone out there is listening to this right now, please visit Dougal's Instagram page. And I'll put a link in the description below. His website's also super sick. It's where you can find his amazing photography. The professional corporate work he's done is just, you've probably seen it on airplanes and bougie magazines. So get a look. What's next for you today? It's the evening time. The kids are coming home from school. What's a Friday night in South Africa look like?
Pizza movie night, bro.
Beautiful.
It's a movie night.
What you guys gonna watch?
I don't know. I'm gonna have to go and find something. I'm not sure. Something old school.
Excellent. Excellent. Let me get a PS question in there. What is your favorite movie of all time?
Sure, bro. Surely it has to be like Chariots of Fire. Surely. When I run, I feel God's pleasure. Don't we all feel that way, huh? When we do that one thing. When I surf, when I ride waves, I feel God's pleasure. Huh? When you shoot waves, you feel God's pleasure. When you hold your firstborn child, you feel God's pleasure. When I run, I feel God's pleasure. Surely. Chariots of Fire.
Gorgeous. Well, on that note, I wish you a great Friday night. Please send love to your family, and let's keep in touch.
May the force be with you. God bless you.
And with you. And to all those out there, if you've enjoyed this, please share, like, and subscribe, and we will catch you in the next episode of Speaking from Water. I'm your host, Sean Ruttkay. Goodbye.